What's going on, folks? Ted from Nerd Immersion here, and it's time to talk about some WotC news. We have some good, some bad, and some AI-related stuff. If you like this kind of news coverage, as well as all the videos that I plan to be making, Vecna Eve of Ruin, and a variety of other stuff coming out, please consider subscribing to the channel. It always helps me out. It's a little click for you, does a lot for me. All right, we'll start with the good news. 2024 core rulebooks expanding the SRD. This is a very long time coming. We'll talk about the specifics here in a minute, but if you know what this is generally a good thing for us in every way, right? Since the team's been hard at work on the 2024 revised and expanded core rulebooks, that being the Player's Handbook, Monster Manual, and Dungeon Master Guide, today we're thrilled to announce the expansion of the 5th edition system reference document SRD 5.2, which will include updated content from the 2024 core rulebooks that will be made available under the Creative Commons license. In 2016, 2 years after the debut of 5th edition, we released the accompanying SRD 5.1, allowing our amazing community of creators to publish content compatible with the game. We're proud to support the SRD 5.2 will be released within weeks of the release of the 2025 Monster Manual. So what this means, and obviously if you were unaware or didn't join the hobby or just need a refresher, essentially the whole dumping the SRD into the Creative Commons is the output of the OGL. It's a whole long thing, and there's tons of videos, a bunch of mine, a bunch of other people's here on the internet explaining kind of what happened. And maybe if you guys are interested, whether again you're a new player or you're just need a refresher, maybe let me know in the comments if you'd like kind of a holistic view at this point, what happened, the kind of timeline and the outcomes and what was going on and why the OGL was so important and why the changes were so potentially devastating. And if you'd like, I can also, to give a better perspective like I've done in the past, bring my, my lawyer friend on here who's a lawyer in IP and does all this kind of stuff and heavily involved in that to kind of explain the legal side of things. And then also when the SRD 5.2 eventually does release, have him come and kind of walk us through what it means and what it doesn't mean, that kind of stuff. So let me know if you're interested in kind of the, an OGL recap, if you will, just to keep you up to date on what's going on. But they also can't release it until the Monster Manual is released in 2025 because the SRD covers all aspects of the game, from player content to dungeon master content to monsters. So it has to be post that, but they're actually being communicative with us now, letting us know what changes are coming. And this is, again, part of that whole being transparent and explaining what you're doing and when you're doing it. And that's all important and part of this whole rebuilding trust. Again, it's never going to fix what the OGL potential situation was. That tarnish, that stain, that sort of lack and loss of trust will never be fully fixed. That chip will always be on everybody's shoulder. At least that's what I think. But they're doing their best to bring it back together. But remember, we haven't gotten to the bad news yet. So that's not in relation to this. So let's keep going. Let's be positive till I at least finish this section. So it says, what is the SRD? The SRD is a guide containing the core rules of D&D, including classes and monsters. It is intended to serve as the foundation for your 5th edition compatible resources. What's going to be in the SRD 5.2? It's an update to SRD 5.1, modernizing the content of the 2024 rules revision. It's a massive update. The SRD 5.2 will provide revised rules at the same scope as 5.1. Creators will have the tools they need to create content using the revised and expanded rule set. It will not, however, include lore references. That's something that's always been the case. If you want to create that, you'll use the DM's Guild, which could potentially mean that the DM's Guild is not going away, which is also a good thing. So again, if you are kind of confused about what this is, very quick, very high level, not, full legal experience or anything, but the foundations of what makes 5e and allows you to do that is what's contained in the SRD. That's what allows things like Tales of the Valley and other stuff like that to exist. It is the base mechanics of the game. So when you go to look at the cleric, if you were to look, as we know from seeing the Unearthed Arcana and the updates that we'll be seeing, I'm sure rolling out from the Wizards of the Coast team over the next little bit, if you were to look at Cleric 2014 and Cleric 2024, they will be different. One of the best examples that I can give to you is the subclass change, right? We know several classes in the 2024 or 2014 Player's Handbook got subclasses at first level, those being the Warlock, the Cleric, and the Sorcerer. And we know several got it at second level, for example, the Druid and the Wizard. And everybody else got their subclasses at level 3. Part of the change that we're seeing with 2024 is all subclass choices will now be made at level 3. So if you wanted to create content based on the 2024 versions of those classes, technically, without an SRD, making a class using that 2024 progression, looking at it and saying, okay, you're going to get to choose, you're in the warrior group, the mage group, the priest group, whatever it is. You get this ability, we're calling it whatever we're calling it. The subclasses come online at third level. You get these choices at this point. Any of those base class mechanics, and you wanted to use those and then create your own subclasses for that base class and then sell it somewhere on the internet, if you were to do that without the SRD, you would be in violation of a copyright and they could come after you for, or maybe it's not copyright, but either way, you'd be in trouble and they could come after you, especially if you were trying to do something like make a big money on Kickstarter, and if it blows up, that could really backfire on you. So as it stands right now, that's how you can see so many people making 5th edition supplemental content on things like Kickstarter or other things, because in the SRD 5.1, it contains the base class for all of the 12 base classes of 5e in the 2024 or 2014 Player's Handbook. It includes all of the base class information and then one subclass for each one to kind of show you the structure of subclasses. And again, remember that it's not going to include, well, you know what? I don't know. I'll be frank, I don't know what it's going to include. But realistically, it's going to give you the foundational information you're going to need to play or create your own content. So that would be something like the base class information and a subclass information. If you were to look at the 20 or the 5.1, it will have one background, which likely in this will have that background granting you a feat at first level, because that's the transition we're seeing with the 2024 rulebooks. Feats come from backgrounds as opposed to a background feature. The SRD 5.1 also includes one feat, because it needs to have a feat to show you how a feat structure works, and that it's an ability score replacement. It has the base equipment, because that's going to show you how that works. It has a selection of a variety of spells. It doesn't have every spell, and a lot of them aren't, and anything, as it mentions here, is not lore related, right? You're not going to have access to Mordenkainen's Magnificent Mansion. You might have access to Magnificent Mansion, or you're not going to have Evard's Black Tentacles. You might have Black Tentacles, and that's why you'll see that in a lot of other people's things, if that's ever been confusing to you. Why you might see somebody say, oh, I'm going to cast Tiny Hut, because Tiny Hut's listed in the spell list, but Leomund's Tiny Hut is not, because Leomund, Evard, Mordenkainen, all those are lore-specific IP that Wizards of the Coast owns, unless it's contained within the SRD 5.1, or in this case 5.2, you are not allowed to utilize that because it's housed within their lore section, whereas whatever's in there is fair game. Now, there was some funky stuff where they dumped the SRD into the OG, or into Creative Commons, because technically I think there's references to Strahd von Zarovich in there. So technically you can use the name Strahd von Zarovich, but basically if it's not included in the SRD, in this case 5.2 coming out, you cannot legally use that for that. So like they'll have a bunch of monsters, right? Because if you want to make your own supplement to use in an adventure that you want to write, and you want to use a green dragon, if green dragon isn't in the 2025 Monster Manual not somehow replicated, obviously we know it will be, but if it's not replicated in some form in the SRD 5.2 or the general hierarchical structure of how a dragon ages and stuff like that is not included in there, you can make up your own dragon, but you can't reference that stat block or use those stat blocks in your adventure, because that would be kind of a either IP, stealing, copyright infringement, whatever it is. That's like they won't include things like the Beholder or the Mind Flayer in the SRD, or at least they haven't in the past, because those are wholly created IPs of the Wizards of the Coast and of Dungeons and Dragons, right? They own that. A lot of other things are kind of more generic: bugbears, goblins, kobolds. Those are kind of general. The public owns those, as it were, as opposed to like Mind Flayers and Beholders are very much Wizards of the Coast. So I hope that makes a little more sense as to why things are saying, when they're saying use lore, right? That's the kind of the benefit to that point about the DM's Guild. That's the benefit of making your content on the DM's Guild. Doing it there, that's the benefit of it, is you're allowed to use all of the content that is outlined within the DM's Guild rules. But like, for example, if you only have, say, 40% of all of the spells are contained within the SRD, DM's Guild will get you basically 100% of those spells. You can access the lore, you could write lore-specific things for the Forgotten Realms, or for whatever else they say you're allowed to write for. But that also comes with the caveat that Wizards of the Coast is going to take 50% of your profit right off the top, because that's how the DM's Guild works. They technically own the IP. You don't own your own IP. You put it out there, but they can technically, you don't own it anymore. They own now the rights to that. And if they want to replicate your content that you put out and replicate it in any of their own future products, they can do so if they wish, and they don't have to credit you if they don't want to. All right, back to this. So what is Creative Commons? It's a nonprofit that writes open source licenses. These licenses are standardized, widely accepted, and trusted across the world. This was the big deal, right? Because the OGL was something that stood this test of time for a very long time, allowing people to use that. And then obviously we're going to change it, and it was going to be a whole big deal. And then in a win for the creators, they dumped the entirety of the SRD 5.1 into Creative Commons, which means that is a license that they no longer hold, and it belongs to the public, meaning they can't renege on that later on like they were going to do with the OGL. When SRD 5.2 releases, will I still have access to the original SRD 5.1? Yes, SRD 5.1 will be a separate document from, or 5.2 will be a separate document from 5.1. You can continue to create as you wish using the SRD 5.1, right? So if you like the structure of the way the classes are designed and things like that from 2014, you can continue to operate under the SRD 5.1. If you want to transition over to the new hotness of 2024, you would use SRD 5.2. Why wait to release SRD 5.2 until after the 2024 core rulebooks have been released? SRD 5.2 will contain information from all 3 revised core rulebooks, as they each work with one another. We don't want to release an incomplete document to creators. If you want it, here's what I was telling you about. We'll see right here. If you wanted to create a subclass, for example, balancing it would require you to understand not only how classes have changed in the 2024 Player's Handbook, but also how monsters have changed in the 2025 Monster Manual. And if you wanted to create a campaign setting, having information for all 3 core rulebooks would be important. All that said, it's important that we wait until all the books have made it into our players' hands to release the SRD into Creative Commons. Why is it called SRD 5.2 and not 5.1x or 6.0? This new SRD will encompass the 5th edition rule set, just like the key updates from the 2024 core rulebooks. SRD 5.1 will remain compatible with existing products. Will it be localized like 5.1 was? Yes, we intend to localize the SRD 5.2, and it will be released in each language we support following the release of all 3 core rulebooks in those languages. What about the SRDs for previous editions? This was another one, because we had said, because that was part of the deal with the OGLs. It also covered things like 3rd edition and stuff like that. And one of the things that was brought up by myself and other creators when we were able to ask WotC questions, will you release the other OGLs or game, whatever they were from the past, into Creative Commons as well, to show that you're looking to protect those as well? Because we still need to complete reviews of those material before they're released into Creative Commons, we made the decision to wait until after 2024 rules revisions were released to begin the reviews of those documents. So that's not a no, and that's not them saying they're not going to. It is, again, take it with a grain of salt, but they're looking to still update those old edition SRDs into Creative Commons. They're just going to wait until they finish rolling this out. Okay, generally, I would call this a win across the board. This is great stuff for creators, especially if you like what you've seen in the Unearthed Arcana, like many of us have. Some things might need some tweaking, but maybe you can fix that when you have the base core mechanics to go off of in the SRD 5.2. Now let's talk about the bad news. The D&D Beyond Marketplace redesign. Now, on its face, a lot of this is good, but there are some things that are bad, and that's what I wanted to touch on here. So what's new in the D&D Beyond Marketplace? D&D Beyond shoppers shipping to the US can now purchase physical books. They can also purchase physical and digital bundles at a discount. We continue to support all customers purchasing digital content only. If you want to purchase physical content and digital content bundles and ship outside of the US, you can purchase on our partner site. You'll also find more information on available products. Think about picking up a copy of Vecna Eve of Ruin. Now you'll get a preview of some of the stunning artwork in the adventure, or from the adventure, and you can see what your digital purchases of it unlocks for your D&D Beyond account. We've also made it easier to see what content is unlocked for your account in D&D Beyond tools, and moved redeem a key to your D&D Beyond account drop-down menu. So on its face, this is good and bad, right? It means one, D&D Beyond has always been a digital marketplace. They did start implementing this whole digital physical bundle concept, but or that was through a different website. Now you can purchase physical copies via D&D Beyond. In theory, this pulls physical book sales away from local game stores. However, it doesn't say anything about the collector's edition covers. Those are still game store exclusive. So consider that. But potentially regular, standard book sales now can also be handled in-house, and you're going to get a discount, so more people may be driven to purchase from the D&D Beyond. So that's kind of a wash, I'll call that. How do I get a discount when I bundle? If you previously purchased a bundle in the D&D store, you'll find the experience has changed. Now simply add both products to your shopping cart and you'll see discounted checkout. This is the bad. Can I still purchase subclasses, feats, and other game listings a la carte? A la carte purchases are no longer supported. However, any individual items you previously purchased will continue to be available for use on D&D Beyond. If you've purchased a la carte items and you would like to buy the digital book, your discounts are available to you at any time by contacting customer service. No, this is bad. And that's why I'm calling this the bad section. So what this means is in the past, which I thought was a very cool concept, if Vecna Eve of Ruin came out and it had 2 new backgrounds in it, and I didn't care for the campaign adventure at all, and I didn't want to unlock the campaign content because I just didn't care about it, but I like having my players, when they join my D&D Beyond campaign, to have access to all of the player options. I could go and buy those 2 backgrounds from Vecna Eve of Ruin for like $1.99 a piece, and now they're unlocked on my D&D Beyond account. To some extent, let's talk something much more probably relatable to a lot of you, something like Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. Maybe you don't care about all the nonsense about mimics and all that other crap, but you care heavily about all the subclasses. So you just say, hey, I just want to buy the player options so that if my players join my D&D Beyond account, or I want to create characters to my heart's content on D&D Beyond, and I want to use those subclasses, I could just buy what I wanted. And if I decided down the road, hey, you know what, I do want to buy the whole book, it would discount each thing you purchased out of the book a la carte. It would continue to drop the overall price down. So for example, for me, I didn't buy, when I bought D&D Beyond stuff for the Dungeon Master's Guide, I didn't buy the world building stuff at the beginning of the Dungeon Master's Guide. I don't care about that. But what I do care about is the 2 subclasses that they had in there, right? The Paladin, the Cleric subclass. But more importantly, what I cared about ultimately was all of the magic items. So I didn't actually care about a lot of like the how to play the game and how to run the game, because I didn't need that. I have a physical book, and most of that's opinion based anyway. But all the magic items and the tables surrounding the magic items are pretty interesting. That's things I would want to have access to in my game, so those I bought a la carte. But, some books, I think like, same thing with like Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide or any of these books that were kind of like a pseudo source book, but also, player, like a campaign guide, but also a source book. I would just buy the player facing content. So some of those books out there, when they were purchased via a la carte, it'd be like you can pick up Sword Coast Adventures Guide, the entire book, for 99 cents, because I bought so much of the other individual player facing content that all that was left was only worth 99 cents in terms of D&D Beyond. But if you did buy a la carte items, it's not like you can just go get those discounts applied automatically like you used to. You now have to reach out to customer service to get those discounts. And again, a la carte is gone. This was a great concept because the thing that I saw with a lot of people, I've seen it in YouTube comments, and I hear it when I just talk to people, if you're a DM and you're never planning to run, say, anything set in the world of Mythic Odysseys of Theros, like, let's say, right? But you like the Glory I think it was the Glory Paladin, or you like some of the magic items, or maybe just the piety system or stuff like that. But you couldn't justify buying an entire book because you weren't going to use half of it. That was kind of the benefit of buying stuff on D&D Beyond. I could buy the bits that I want and not have to purchase the full book. Going forward now, even if you only like one aspect of the book, or maybe you're the DM and you just want the monsters from the Vecna book, but you don't actually care about any of the content, you just want to have those monsters to be able to pull them into your D&D Beyond maps, or to pull them into your D&D Beyond encounter builder, or what have you, just be able to view them on the fly. That is now gone forever. If you want it, you got to buy the whole book, which is a pretty big bummer, and it's kind of taking away usability in a way that we used to have, and we've now removed it. Or, a lot of you, I'm sure, are going to say in the comments, I don't use D&D Beyond anyway, so I don't care, and fair point. What happens if I placed a pre-order before the marketplace change? Your order is still safe and sound. If you pre-order a bundle containing both physical and digital items, you can still find your order on our partner site. Additionally, your content will unlock on the scheduled early access date. A little bit about history. Can I make feature requests or report a bug for the marketplace? Of course. And then they kind of have some light for that. So there you go. And lastly, the AI. We now have an official FAQ on the Dungeons and Dragons generative AI art FAQ. There was some more stuff circulating around about more AI related things. I think it was a image of Lord Soth, and it was had a quote at the bottom that did, I'll be honest, when you read it, it did kind of sound like it might have been AI generated because of how the grammar didn't seem to really work, I didn't think. But I'm not making any accusations here, but there is a full generative AI art FAQ. So it goes on to say, recently we've had a few occasions where art used in marketing and game pieces have been publicly scrutinized, including for the possible inclusion of generative AI. During this time, we've made mistakes, while at the same time, we've also seen artists and their work misidentified as problematic in a variety of ways. To that end, we're sharing a FAQ that addresses how we assess and respond to generative AI concerns with art commissions for both Magic the Gathering and D&D, both before and after it has been published. Generative AI is constantly evolving, and the FAQ will be revised on an ongoing basis, right? There's a variety of things. There was the Big B's Glory of the Giants AI scandal, where a bunch of the art in there was AI. There was original artist work that, when then given to some final editor, kind of touched them all up with AI, I think was the story that happened with that. So that was a whole thing. Then there was the thing with Magic the Gathering, where Wizards of the Coast flat out said the image was not AI, and then they had to retract that statement to say, actually, no, it was AI. I don't know. All right. Both brands have their own artists' handbooks. These are not public documents, but every artist who works on them is given a copy and is expected to stick to the guidelines. The core of our policy is this: Magic and D&D have been built on innovation, ingenuity, and the hard work of talented people who sculpt these beautiful, creative games. As such, we require artists, writers, and creatives contributing to Magic and D&D to refrain from using AI generative tools to create final Magic or D&D products. We've made a few other statements publicly as well, including 2 recent statements on our policy on generative AI art and Magic the Gathering products, as well as we did similar statements for D&D. What tools do you have in place to detect generative AI? So we regularly evaluating resources we could use to help detect generative AI is important to us. We continue having a human in the loop regardless, especially since these tools are quite new. How will you handle a situation where a piece of art has used generative AI and it wasn't caught by your internal processes or tools? The investigation process is much the same. We gather whatever information we have from reports, both public and private. We re-review the art, we rerun our tools, and we circle back with the artist who created the piece. Often, if public discourse is where a credible violation of our art policy was first discovered, we may make a statement. Why are you not being transparent about AI use? Good question. We try to be as transparent as possible, but not at the cost of people's privacy or livelihoods. Our artists put themselves and their names out there with every piece they produce, and our priority is going to be protecting their privacy whenever possible. That means not all public discourse on generative AI art use is going to result in public statement by us. That said, we have been and will continue to clear what we do not allow, or that we do not allow the use of generative AI in our art. While detection can be difficult and lines blurry, we are working hard to make sure our art is made by talented humans who have delighted our fans for decades. Blank piece of art sure looks like AI to me. Why are you not doing something about it? This is generally the statement that I see. Someone will see a piece of art from a Magic card or a piece of D&D, and then this is what someone will be like. That looks like AI. What are you going to do about it? We may not respond to online discourse about AI art for a variety of reasons, including but not limited to our investigation revealed that there was no generative AI used to protect the privacy of one or more individuals. To investigate, the investigation was inconclusive. We made internal changes such as declining to work with an artist further, but did not publicly comment. Our preference is to handle the issue and the artist relation internally when possible. When that is not possible, our goal is to be as clear and concise and hopefully prevent further churn on the issue, both for the artist in question and for us. And that makes sense, right? You know, that's what happens. People accuse people of AI, but then we've also seen people like, this looks like AI to me. And then the artist is like, here's the receipts. No, it's not. But in the world we live in, when someone makes something AI related, and then if people start accusing them of that, it can very much negatively affect their reputation and their livelihood. And unfortunately, also in the world we live in, kind of once the damage is done, it's hard to come back from that. So that's why they may not make a statement in public or just ignore it kind of completely, seemingly on our end, or maybe they work behind the scenes. But sometimes they do say, yeah, you're right, it was AI, and we've cut ties with this artist. It seems like you no longer work with blank artist anymore, but you haven't said anything. Why not? Working relationships with artists can change for a variety of reasons. Everything from a decision made by an artist to move in another direction to our evolving styles not matching up. Sometimes artists don't make art for Magic for years before coming back. I saw/read that other Hasbro brand is using generative AI or will use generative AI. Why is that different from Magic and D&D? Hasbro has a vast portfolio of 1,900 plus brands, of which Magic the Gathering and D&D are two very important, cherished brands. Each brand is going to approach its products differently. What is the best interest for Trivial Pursuit is quite likely different for that than Magic the Gathering. So they're not ignoring that Hasbro isn't using generative AI. They may use generative AI for a variety of other ones, but they're coming out and openly stating that's not going to be the case for Magic and D&D. If there's only one takeaway, this is interesting. If there's only one takeaway I should have from this FAQ, what should it be? Human beings are fallible, whether it is a conglomerate of human beings like a company or a single human being like an artist. In the tension between perfection and transparency, we have erred on the side of transparency. As stated throughout, we have been consistent in our position with respect to generative AI and Magic the Gathering and D&D art, and we want our community to know that we are working to ensure that they can see us deliberating on how best to meet that commitment, even if we all occasionally stumble along the way. So there you go, folks. That's a recap of all of the WotC news over the past couple days of what's going on. Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. The D&D Beyond Marketplace is a bummer, the a la carte stuff going away, but ultimately, what are we going to do? Your options are just, live with it or just ignore it. But the SRD 5.2 becoming a thing is definitely a win, and honestly, they didn't have to. That's something also to consider. They said they would, but realistically, they didn't have to say, you know what? And I kind of, before the whole OGL thing, I kind of was just assumed that they wouldn't. That was kind of one of my biggest assumptions is that, yeah, they see all the people making all the money and doing all the stuff with the SRD and the OGL. And then I just assumed that whatever the new edition was going to be, or in this case, revision of the edition, that they were just going to not allow you to publicly make stuff for it without, going through the DMs Guild or force you into some avenue where they get a chunk of the pay. But they are allowing you to make it, entirely however you'd like. So We'll ultimately see, they may be speaking a little out of turn because we don't know what the SRD 5.2 is actually going to look like. I assume it's going to be just like the SRD 5.1, but with updates to kind of be, in line with the new rules. But who knows what we'll ultimately see. So anyway, again, let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. I'll see you all next time.